Understandably, you can't exactly play Hex Command Nova and games that are science fiction, essentially science fiction. You can't play them like a World War II game modified. Well, why is that? Uh, because the established concepts of a World War II skirmish uh, might have some relevance or some congruency with uh, science fiction. In this case, our Hex Command Nova version of BattleTech. There might be some relevance, but it's not quite the same. We've talked about this before, but it's important to remember it again, to mention it again, that these vehicles, much like the M3 Lee or the Russian, I forget even what it was called, T-24 or something like that, had multiple weapons. The M3 Lee had its 75 millimeter sponson mounted gun, which was sad, and its 37 millimeter in the turret. And I believe it had a crew of 7, so it was crazy amount of people. The Russians called it a coffin for 7 brothers because it had little to no sloped armor, and it wasn't very thick armor, and it was riveted, except for the British version called the Grant. The turret was pathetic and sad. It mounted the 37 millimeter gun, but as we know, regardless how many times you fire that or what your rate of fire is, it's a sad little gun. That gun is only up there to pick off jeeps and armored cars and such. The 75 millimeter on the Lee and the Grant was a pathetic 3-inch gun. In other words, what I'm saying was just sad. Very low velocity, well, relatively speaking, to any other 75s that came after it, of course. So the armor penetration was sad, if any. I mean, it just was more of an impact than it was an armor penetration. I think even taking on the Sherman 4 in the desert, the Lee and Grant had issues, which is hard to believe because essentially the Panzer 4, Panzer 3s, had no sloped armor in the front, at least to speak of. Their front glacis was almost vertical. So these vehicles didn't really. The only way, again, the Allies could win is by numerical superiority, because the Germans outclassed them in almost every fashion, almost every way you can imagine. So numeric superiority. The famous quote from some book or some person in the German army was, "Sure, we knocked out 3 Shermans in 5 minutes, but there were 7, 8, 9 others after it. We'd lose 1 tank and we couldn't replace it for days. They lose a tank and they replace it with 5. So the later Shermans, of course, were a match. In this game, you have a vehicle that's walking. We have already said, trying to be engineers about it, not fantasy people, that the vehicle couldn't possibly be more than 30 feet tall. Couldn't. It just can't be unless there's some magical technology that enables it to be so big, as they show in the both cartoons and the movies and on in the game, so on. The vehicles are enormously, ginormously oversized for the reality of and I know that's a reality of even the science fiction, the mechanics. And James Cameron, as we've cited many times, we applaud his smartness for bringing in some believability, especially as we saw in Avatar. So these vehicles have multiple weapons. The M3 Lee had 2. The 75 millimeter gun, as in our rules for Hex Command Mechanized, it fires once. The little 37 millimeter light gun fires twice every time it fires. But these guys may have light lasers, ping, 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 or pew, 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 right? Sometimes these mechs in their bodies or even on their arms and such, wherever, they have 4. They may have 4 light lasers. They may have 4 medium lasers. Nobody seems to have 4 large lasers, which are heavy, because the power drain on the infrastructure of the mech is large for the large laser, which we will just call a heavy laser. Heavy, medium, and light. That's what we're all about. And very light. So that's what these vehicles have. And then on top of that, they have these multiple launch rocket systems, LRS. As we've said, the medium size is the long range rockets. We call those medium. Strength, weight. The SRMs in BattleTech are supposedly shorter range, we call heavy, because that's why they're shorter, because they're heavier. Well, does that really make sense? Not really, but it's okay. We'll play with it, right? We'll go with it. Short range means heavy, long range means medium. And that's all there is to it. But so these vehicles have the ability of shooting a salvo of 6, 10, 15, 20 at a time. Now, and here's the other thing. They're not guided, right? Which begs the question, why aren't they guided? Why are they just fire and forget? You just aim for the target and then you keep moving or something. Why aren't they guided? No idea. I have no idea. I don't even know if that even makes sense. Well, it means, imagine a Huey, the Vietnam era films you've seen, where a Huey might be firing its MLRS mounted on its little wings. Those aren't guided. That is basically where the concept came from, I think. Vietnam era guys working on the BattleTech system said, no, these are just mass salvo, fire and forget. Well, actually, fire and forget means guided. So it's not fire and forget, but you forget about it anyway. So they fire this massive volley, and then the reload happens. So imagine, if you will, an LRM column 10, a pack sitting on a guy's shoulder, right? Sitting on his shoulder. There's a pack, and it's mounted and it's armored, whatever, but it's just a big, series of tubes. And he takes his target and he goes click, and it goes, all those rockets go flying toward the target. Now, granted, it's the future, so they're fairly accurate. They're not, again, guided, but say they're accurate. They'll hit around the target mostly, but some will miss because they're just not guided. Over time, the dispersal of those rockets is what we're talking about. Over distance. So the rockets go, and then what happens in the background architecture? The tubes all get reloaded, and another pack rolls up into position. Or, we're not entirely sure about the mechanics, each individual tube is loaded by an articulation process from the ammo storage area, which is somewhere in the torso of the beast, right? Somewhere down in it, or in the arm or the shoulder, or somewhere behind it. But at any rate, the rockets go to their destination. If it's an LRM-10, there's 10 tubes that have to be reloaded. So once those 10 are fired, and by the way, it would appear that pilots don't have the ability of firing just one. They got to fire them all at once. That's another story. So anyway, all the rockets go, and then okay, the mechanical or actuators and such pull new rounds into those tubes. And what if there's 2 of them? What if they're LRM-15s? What if, like in the Archer, that the Archer's got big packs on its, like right here on its shoulders, and those things whoosh go flying out. Okay, so that's the rockets issue, and the same goes for SRMs, short range. Same thing. They fire and then they go, beep, 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 and they repopulate. And now you're ready to shoot again. So you can't really do it. I mean, sure, you can have an MLRS system in World War II. The Sherman Calliope is a good example. Right? The Nebelwerfer, the German, the rocket Katyusha, same. But they had to be manually reloaded. So you had to get out and put all the rockets back in. Well, okay, we've advanced quite a bit from there. These are automatic reloading of the rockets. Ready to fire. Whoosh, another round. All right? So the bigger the pack, the longer it takes to reload. Hypothetically. That's just rockets. Now we've got these massive pulse lasers. The PPCs, the particle projection cannons. These are cannons that are firing photon torpedoes, essentially is what they are. And it's an encapsulated energy bolt. And it has a pretty long range because when that thing fires, you power it up and then you pull the trigger and it goes just like you've seen in movies and so on. It doesn't go pew, pew, pew because that would be a different kind of a weapon. But this is a big weapon that, powers up and then boof, and then the next shot, boof, right? Your pulse laser might go poof, 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 poof. These things are all schematics. The statistics on these weapons are all what are to be considered when you think about, okay, what kind of weapon is what? And ergo, Hex Command Nova, we say no. Forget about it. It's either very heavy, either very heavy, medium, light, or very light. And if it's a pulse laser, or a laser, or a particle projection cannon, a PPC, we kind of it doesn't matter. We kind of do and kind of don't. We just say, it's an energy weapon. It's just energy. That's it. It's the rate of fire question. Does it have a rate of fire? Well, we give them all, unless they're medium or unless they're light, they have one shot. The light lasers fire twice every time they do, just as if it was a projectile weapon. And that's all. It's just an energy weapon. How many of these can you fire if you have two of them? Well, obviously, your design of your vehicle is designed to fire both at once. Okay, so can you fire the rockets and the PPCs and the medium lasers and light lasers and everything all at once? Isn't there a huge power drain? The answer is yes. Can you fire everything once? Hypothetically. Most of the time, the design will allow a mech to fire all of its weapons at once. And then, what happens? You have to wait? Well, the waiting is relatively quick. So it's immaterial. You simply say, you fire it. Okay? Can I fire it again? Only if it's light. Then you can fire it twice. When it fires. Not fire now and then a couple seconds later fire it again. When the enemy does something. No, you fire it twice right there. Boom, boom. Your pew, pew. That's it. Okay? And that's how the game basically operates. And other persons have asked, what about this roster situation? Well, like we've shown before, the roster cards aren't even needed anymore because we've got posts 3D printed stuck to the base of every mech. And those little posts will be what you put an O-ring on. So we have a roster, but it's an O-ring roster damage system tracking that you put on the actual model on the game table. Which means you don't need the paperwork anymore. You don't need a pencil. You don't need nothing. The index cards that we've got that describe what the vehicle is are really only for reference. And then you track damage to the mech, and that's it. That's how it works. And now, combined arms. This was the last thing I wanted to talk about regarding aircraft. Because in some of the paintings from BattleTech, you see the aircraft in the background, right? Did you ever see an aircraft in a BattleTech game? When was the last time you saw a BattleTech game? Did you ever see aircraft? As a matter of fact, here's a better question. Did you ever see infantry? Here, even better. Did you ever see artillery? How about APCs? Uh-uh. The vast majority of the BattleTech games, or even the Cav games, nobody seems to be concerned with infantry. Everything is about battling robots. Boom, boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom. And that's it. Why? Because that's really only what people care about. Back in the day, when the game was being invented and we were playing it when it first came out, people were insane about it. This is way before MechWarrior. Although, maybe not too soon, before the first versions of the software came out. People had combined arms games because they saw it as a Cold War era type of a game system where you had infantry, artillery, you had aircraft, and etc. So you did. But then eventually the infantry and all the other peripheral stuff started to get less and less important, and people just started having battling robots. Man operated, pilot operated robot, if you want to call it that. That's the fastest, easiest way. And Robotech and anime and Japanese stuff infiltrated our world, beautiful as it was. And players, of course, liked it because it was fascinating stuff. And of course, you can't beat the Japanese anime. People have tried, but everybody fails. It's like trying to compete with Pixar. Anyway, sorry that editorial offended anybody. It's not my intention. You know where I'm going, right? Where I've been. The fact is that these other game systems exist out there. They have different ways of doing things. And the Robotech and or the Gundam universes have very big models, very expensive models that probably aren't even used in games. But of course, they're plastic injection molded, massive 6 to 7 inches tall things, toys, that are collectible because the users who have them and are making these models are skilled enough to put them together, etc., paint them up, put decals on them, and so on. That's the difference. In the BattleTech world, Hex Command Nova and its offshoots and Cav, you have, the models are this big. In the Cav universe, we're about the same, but in the BattleTech universe, they're now a lot smaller. They're much smaller. They're actually, in scale numbers, 1/285th, which is 6 millimeter. That is GHQ micro armor scale. And the Cav and Hex Command Nova have decided 10 millimeter was the best. 10 millimeter is 1/160th. 15 millimeter technically is kind of like 1/100th. Okay, that's 15 millimeter. So 12 millimeter to 10 millimeter, greater than 1/100th scale. So from 10 millimeter, in other words, the size of the man, the mech should be the size that befits a 10 millimeter tall pilot. In most cases, Cav successfully molded, cast, etc., and fabricates their mechs to be appropriately 10 millimeter for cockpit size. Sometimes not, because they inherited their designs, from what I understand, from elsewhere. But at any rate, 10 millimeter is the idea, and so hence they have, is that through Reaper miniatures? I'm not sure. 10 millimeter scale vehicles and infantry. Well, we have decided that that's a little too small, and to be that accurate makes the miniatures themselves too small. So what we did was we simply said, you know what, we're not going to go to 172, which is 22 millimeter tall infantry. We could. As a matter of fact, we actually tried that. It was just a little too big, right? It just didn't quite work. And the mechs, the cost of us making our own mechs was larger. So we went with the 10 millimeter mech, which is about, for the heaviest mech, the assault mechs, we're talking 65 millimeters tall. And of which we don't have any yet, because everything we're doing is stopping at heavy. We don't go to assault mechs yet. We have maybe 1 or 2 assault mechs. The infantry, we decided to go with 20 millimeter. And when we started printing them, we went, you know what, kind of 18. So we brought the size down of the infantry to about 18 millimeter. Because 20 was fine. Steve Johansson, or Stan Johansson, makes 20 millimeter science fiction and road warrior types and other kinds of infantry. There are other companies that make 20 millimeter metal infantry science fiction. Because we have the 3D printer, we decided to get the prints off of, or the files off of Thingiverse, and we've been printing Warhammer 40K Cadians, or Acadians. I'm not even sure what they are. If they're Acadians or Cadians. I don't know. I'm sure I'll find out. But the fact is, the infantry look is very colonial marine-ish. And that's why. Because we wanted to be able to have that colonial marine with a relatively non-sophisticated weapon, right? Still a solid bolt firing weapon, right? Which they called a rifle. Essentially, but however, it was a machine gun. It's a rapid firing rifle, but it was a machine gun. Everybody carried the same. So the colonial marines in Alien and all of its rest of the series, again, it's all James Cameron stuff. Smart, engineered smart, believable, etc. And so this is why we went with the Acadians, or Cadians as they are called. So anyway, you get the idea. If it looks like contemporary infantry, it paints up like contemporary infantry, that's the reason. And that is the entire reason why, when we started this, we talked about how it relates to World War II. Well, it kind of doesn't, but it does. It relates to terrestrial, historical conflicts. And in our case, the colonial marine outfit, the kit and everything else is one faction. There may be hundreds of other factions. They may look exactly the same, have different colors. But we went with that. Then, of course, the search is on for a new alien or opposition forces that look a little similar. The Kurosan 15 millimeter collection that we had, we liked the shapes and the sculpts, but it wasn't viable. 15 millimeter just wasn't viable. And so we have since departed our Kurosan miniatures, and we're going to stay with printing our own. We have more control. We just need to find the files that we can print. And are we talking about bugs? No. We are anti-bug. Now, is that logical? No, of course not. There will be bugs in the universe or in the galaxy, and they will be intelligent bugs, insectoid aliens. That's completely believable. There's no reason to say it's not believable, because it is. Other types of carbon-based life forms are definitely possible. Are they bipedal? We want to see them bipedal, but they could be multipedal. They could be quadpedal. They could be like, wolves, dogs. Raptors are bipedal. So the reptilians are bipedal. Could there be ape-like creatures? Yes. Any evolutionary understanding is a potential for millions of years of evolution for that, or hundreds of thousands of years of evolution for that species to become intelligent and have the dexterity in its design and fingertips and everything to make tools and therefore progress through history, have their own conflicts, and progress into their advanced stages. So yes, aliens of various forms are entirely possible. The others that we've called in our space campaign are those that are so advanced they're practically magical. For instance, the Greys and other types of aliens that have been, reported, true or false, doesn't matter. The fact is that those advanced societies are the ones who are outside the norm of our concern, because we are into the conflict era, and or the conflict eras. And sad as it may be, that is going to be pretty much, across the galaxy. There's going to be warring factions, and we're probably going to be one of them if we aren't already. So, but these advanced civilizations are so far above us and beyond us that they're practically walking, and they are, as the reports have said, they walk through walls. Their technology allows them to ignore the physics that we have and impose their own reality into our reality. Whether these are multi-dimensional beings or out of our dimension being, doesn't matter. The fact is they are not our norm, and they are not from us, or they are not existing in our plane. They are coming from outside. And that is the type of alien that would be called the others. They're relatively, well, we hope, mostly peaceful and don't want to interfere. So in our campaign system, when we come upon an ancient civilization, we just call it the others, because there's an indication of an ancient civilization that is now gone, and nothing else can be determined as to what the outcome was for that civilization. The best evidence is Harlan Ellison's Star Trek episode, City on the Edge of Forever, where that gatekeeper, the gateway, led to a period of time in Earth's history, which was a fantastic episode. Probably, I think, the best episode in all of the Star Trek stories. So, that is my pre-Christmas 23 rant about where things are with Hex Command Nova infantry and the mechs and the multi-weapon situation. So you can start from a World War II concept and you can graduate into science fiction, but you have to understand you may or may not have the infantry that you expect to see, and it may not be in the bulk that you've seen it. Of course, it could be if you want it to be that way, but in reality, once the mechanics, once the machines take over, they pretty much take over, and the infantry is left to clean up, or hold the house or the building, or whatever. But that's about it. So yeah, that's the kind of game system we're talking about.